चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहु पुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं हरिः वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। So, in our previous class on the Bhagavad Gita, we discussed the idea of rebirth, reincarnation, the cycle of birth and death that an individual conscious being travels through, and how it starts making sense when we analyze the dream body. This is what we discussed as an introduction to the discussion that Sri Krishna is starting to have in the shlokas that we are about to study. We had already pronounced the fifth shloka of the fourth chapter, but the discussion on rebirth was so detailed that we could not study the meaning and have a short discussion on what this shloka is trying to tell us. So I'll take up the thread from there. The shloka is on page number 72 on this book. We had already pronounced it in our previous class, so we don't need to pronounce it again. We'll just study its meaning. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjuna tanyaham Veda sarvani natvam vetha parantapa. This was the shloka. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. To the question of Arjuna, Shri Bhagavan, Lord Krishna, his master, the master of the Gita, said, The word Bhagavan today means God. But it is still, even today, in Sanskrit speaking circles, it is still used as a very respectful term of address in India. For example, when I studied with my master, when we used to ask questions in our class in Sanskrit, we would address him as Bhagavan. In the Upanishads, we find students addressing their masters as Bhagavan. So what does this word really mean? It does not literally mean God. It has a very specific meaning. It is now applied today in modern Hindi language only for God and no one else. And people actually can get pretty angry if someone else uses the term for himself. But literally speaking, the word Bhagavan, it means endowed with Bhaga. And Bhaga is a technical term for 6 qualities: power, Aishwarya; dharma, righteousness; yashas, which means fame; Shri means wealth; vairagya, freedom from mental coloring through sense objects. When the mind gets colored by a particular sense object as it gets in contact with it through the senses, so freedom from that coloring and freedom from ignorance. These 6 things. Once again, inner power, and also, because the word is Aishwarya, the state of complete dominion over oneself. This is the first meaning. The second meaning is righteousness. The third meaning is good fame. The fourth meaning is wealth. And wealth, whenever we speak of wealth, then it is worldly, mundane wealth as well as spiritual inner wealth. So, worldly wealth is what we understand by wealth. Mundane wealth is what we understand by wealth. And inner spiritual wealth consists of all the noble qualities, virtues that a person cultivates, develops in his life through the practice of yoga. By becoming aware of these virtues and by trying to practice them, and of course, trying to practice them and actually succeeding in them requires a lot of inner strength. That is what yoga is about, to provide us that inner strength when we want to have it. Through the discipline that we cultivate through the practice of yoga, that provides us that inner strength. So that is all considered wealth. When Patanjali speaks of cultivating friendliness, compassion, forgiveness in our life as one of the first steps towards inner purification, then he's describing these inner virtues. So that all would be included under the word wealth, inner wealth. Because the Sanskrit word Vitta or Shri, there are 2 words for wealth in Sanskrit, and they are very interesting because Shri means that which supports us, that which nourishes us. That is called Shri. So the Sanskrit word for wealth, which has also been used here, Shri Bhagavan, the one who is endowed with Shri. Shri means Ashraya. Ashraya means to bear, to support, to nourish, to uphold. So that external wealth is required because it supports our life, it supports our existence. To that extent, as long as it does not become an object of blind greed and leads us into hell. But till before that, it is certainly a great means of nourishment and support. It is required. It cannot be denounced. And similarly, inner qualities also support us, nourish us, uphold us, and therefore they are called Shri. That is the meaning of the Sanskrit word for wealth. Another word for Sanskrit word for wealth is Vitta, which is quite cognate with the English word wealth. And Vitta, derived from the root vidlri, which means to accomplish, something that a person earns in his life. So one has to work hard to cultivate wealth, external wealth, as well as internal qualities. A person has to work hard to cultivate them. In that sense, they are vitta. That is why the Sanskrit words can easily be applied to both aspects. Inner merit, inner virtues, inner good qualities, as well as external wealth. And therefore, whenever the Vedas, the Upanishads, they speak of wealth, when the Vedic masters pray the divine to give them wealth in their life, they always refer to both. For example, Lakshmi in Hinduism, who is the goddess of wealth, people today understand her only to be the goddess of external wealth. But in reality, she is a manifestation of inner wealth as well. So the idea of external and inner wealth, we will come back to this in the Bhagavad Gita in the 16th chapter, where the whole 16th chapter gives a complete list of what inner wealth is. Sri Krishna starts fearlessness, purity of heart, purity of intention, abhayam sattva samshuddhi, dhyana yoga vyavasthi sthiti, the capability to enter the state of meditation, focus, complete attentiveness, mindfulness, all these. This is how he starts the list of divine wealths. So someone who is endowed with these properties and then therefore is capable of keeping his mind content, free from the coloring of external objects, and hence has been capable of transcending the ignorance that limits his understanding, that limits his perspective, that poses a limitation on his knowledge. Such a being is called Bhagavan. That is the meaning of the word Bhagavan. Another definition that we also find is that someone who is established and has experienced the very source of everything, the one that has experienced the entity into which everything merges back, from which everything comes and into which everything goes, someone who has understood wisdom as well as ignorance. And this is I love this definition, because not only being aware of wisdom, but also being aware of ignorance, of one's own ignorance, and that many times we are incapable of understanding somebody else when we can't see through that person's ignorance. But when we see through that person's ignorance, we can first understand that person and can even most probably, in our love and compassion, help that person to overcome that limited view, limited perspective. So someone who is capable of doing that, such a person is called Bhagavan. And the emphasis on this inner wealth is again placed by adding the word Shri, which is also a term of respect, like Mr. in Sanskrit, Mr. in English. We use the word Shri as an additional term of respect in addressing. So this is what Shri Bhagavan Uvacha means. Then Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacha Arjuna. O Arjuna, many births have happened. In your case, they have already happened. In your case as well as my case. And here, Sri Krishna refers to the endless incarnations in which the omnipresent divinity manifests in this world to do some good work for the upliftment of humanity. Such incarnations are not in any particular number, but they are endless, they are infinite. The idea of incarnation, the idea that omnipresent consciousness, which is present everywhere but in its formless state, is capable of manifesting itself on this level of existence amongst us as a human being, and not necessarily as a human being, but also as an animal, or in the form of any living entity, actually, to perform a good work, to perform a good deed. This idea lies at the very core of, may it be yoga philosophy, Buddhism, Jainism, or Hinduism, all these cosmic outlooks, all their cosmic philosophy. It's a very central aspect, and there is no finite number to that. The masters are very clear. Avatara hyasankheya harihe sattvanidhirgvija. That omnipresent entity is capable of taking infinite. It takes infinite incarnated forms, like Yatha vidasinah kulyaha sarasahasyuh sahasrashah. What he's saying is that, like from an inexhaustible lake, such as the ocean, can be the source of infinite numbers of streams of water, or even a very big, inexhaustible, ever-flowing lake can be the cause of infinite dikes, rivulets, small channels can come out of it. So similarly, incarnations can be infinite. Even here in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, after he will give a list of his various manifestations in all human and non-human species, Shri Krishna will conclude by saying, on page number 184, Nantosti mama divyanam vibhuti nam parantapa. Arjuna, there is no limit to my divine manifestations. The list that I have provided is just a brief description by me of the extent of my glory. So, this idea that in whosoever, what does avatara really mean? Avatara means to descend, to come down. So in whosoever, this divine consciousness of doing good to others, doing what Sri Krishna calls sarva bhuta hiterataha, being constantly engaged in the well-being of all beings, in someone in whom such noble thoughts have manifested, descended, that descending, that coming down of those noble ideas into this level of existence, into this worldly level of existence, that is avatara. And someone in whom such thoughts, such ideas have strongly become manifest and guide his life, guide his complete life into that direction, and if he does not think of anything else except of the well-being for all beings, and finding methods of how to achieve it in reality, on this level of existence, where there is so much suffering, so many problems, so much pain, so much grief, to find a way to relieve the world from that. Such a person is an avatar, is an incarnation, and that is not limited by any particular space and time. It can happen in any country, in any nation, in any tradition, in any religion. So, this idea of avatara, as I said, is very central, and Srimad Bhagavad Gita gives quite a long list. The Puranas, the texts on Indian mythology, they usually provide a list of 22 plus 2 avatars, which means 24 avatars, 24 incarnations, amongst which Kapila also, the first master in the yogic traditions, the first human master in the yogic traditions, far ancient, then Patanjali himself, and in the yogic tradition, actually it is Kapila. If you look at Yoga Sutras commentaries, we always find Kapila to be the Adi Vidwan, to be the first master in the yoga tradition. Patanjali is very clear about that. Sage Patanjali, in his first sutra of the Yoga Sutra, he says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. He uses the word Anu. Anu means after. After I have been instructed into it, I am re-instructing, representing the teachings of yoga. So the idea is that the tradition was already well established. We actually find at least 25 Yoga Sutras by masters which are chronologically far more ancient than Patanjali himself. Acharya Panchashikha, most probably, according to some accounts in the Puranas, he would have been the disciple's disciple of Kapila. Kapila's disciple was Asuri, and Asuri's disciple was Panchashikha. So he's supposed to have composed a text on yoga, out of which around 25 verses have remained. So Kapila has been mentioned there. Kapila also had a tremendous influence on Buddha's philosophy, Buddha's teachings. The very fact that we cannot neglect the idea that the Buddha was the prince of Kapilavastu, Kapilavattu, a city established by students of Kapila. So Kapila is also listed amongst these 24 incarnations, out of which 10 have become most famous. Usually when you visit temples throughout India, we find these 10 incarnations, out of which the 9th one is the Buddha, the 8th one is Krishna, the 7th one is Rama, like this. And the first one is, of course, in the form of a fish. The second one, for example, in the form of a tortoise. These 10 are the ones that were systematically worshipped in ancient India and are still systematically worshipped in modern Hindu temples throughout the Indian subcontinent. That is where the idea of Dashavatara, the 10 incarnations, but this in no way means that there are only 10 incarnations. These are just the ones, the most important ones that have been picked up by the Master from an infinite number of incarnations. And one of them is a future one, which means there will be no end to these incarnations with any one of these. Many future ones will come. There might be many present amongst us today, and there were many existing before. So the idea of incarnation is very important, but these 10 have been highly celebrated and have become subjects of great artistic achievements on the Indian subcontinent, may it be poetry, may it be theatre, may it be dance, music, sculpture, and painting. For example, we will see a dance performance tomorrow, and we will see that most of that performance and most of Indian classical dance performance revolves around a life episode of one of these 10 incarnations. So most artistic achievement, they have been the subjects of the greatest artistic achievements on this Indian subcontinent. And some of these are also deeply related to the asana practice and commemorated through names of the asanas. For example, if you look at the definition in Light on Yoga by Guruji on Matsyasana, you find the idea there. Matsyasana, the fish posture, If you look at the definition of Guruji's Light on Yoga on Kurmasana, on the tortoise pose, we find the description there as well. So it is there also in yogic practice. So Arjuna, but unfortunately, Tanyaham Veda Sarvani, fortunately, I know all of them, but unfortunately, Natvam Vedha Parantapa. You are not aware of it. You have forgotten this fact. And the only reason that we have forgotten it, we are not aware of this entity, because our distracted state of mind does not allow us to experience the immortal aspect within our being. And it is only that, therefore we think that we are born, therefore we think that we will die as this body dies, and we can't think before our birth, and we don't think beyond our death. Because we still have not experienced the entity which in no way can experience death. It is the more we think about consciousness itself, the more we analyze it, the more we meditate on it, we realize that it cannot be destroyed. Yoga, one of the works of yoga is to remove this veil of ignorance. When it speaks of moksha, when it speaks of freedom, freedom from what? Freedom from avidya, freedom from ignorance and the bondage that is created by that ignorance. So Patanjali, for example, in his Yoga Sutras, he says that when a person reduces his possessions, because in our life we are so much engrossed with all these things to play that we have accumulated in our life, that we are completely lost in them and can never think about ourselves. So when a person starts reducing his possessions and becomes more and more introvert and starts to analyze the inner reality, that is where, when Patanjali says, Janma Kathanta Sambodha, why was I born? What is the purpose of this birth? What is the purpose of this human existence? From where was I created? Into which will I merge back? All these questions start coming up into our mind, and we start thinking, we start analyzing, we start making an attempt to find an answer to these questions. That is when an inner journey unfolds. So the idea of aparigraha, non-possessiveness, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya and aparigraha, the fifth yama that is there in Ashtanga Yoga, in the eighth limb path of yoga, why aparigraha, why non-possessiveness is so important for Patanjali. He says that we realize how this birth came in place. What was the reason? Why it is there? These questions get answered. And as a person also goes deeper and starts to analyze the samskaras that we talked about, these unconscious, subtle impressions, when they come up into his conscious awareness, he stands face to face with them. He becomes, by analyzing them, by becoming aware of them, this gives a yogi an insight into the experiences that he had in his previous births. That is another idea that Patanjali gives, that samskara sakshat karanat, when through tremendous focus a person becomes aware of these samskaras that we discussed in great detail in our previous session, and that was the purpose why I discussed samskara, so that we can make sense of this sutra, that samskara sakshat karanat, when a person becomes aware in meditation of these samskaras, purva jati dhyanam, he experiences those events which actually impressed those impressions in his unconscious mind. And I think when this psychiatrist, Brian Weiss, analyzes his subject, a young child, in this very famous book, Many Lives, Many Masters, he's going into that direction. Samskara Sakshat, exactly what Patanjali said 2,200 years ago. He's presenting it in a practical form. Exactly that. So much has been written on incarnation. I don't want to go back to that idea. Krishna is Yogeshwara. Often in the Bhagavad Gita, he's referred to as Yogeshwara. Yoga in Hinduism has developed in two distinct streams. One stream worshipped Shiva, and the other lineage worshipped Vishnu and Krishna. And therefore both lineages have their own words for their divinity. Yogeshwara is Shiva and Yogeshwara is Krishna. Yogeshwara means the Lord of yogis. Shiva, in his meditative posture, is Yogeshwara, the Lord of yogis. And Sri Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita uses the word in the last verse of the Bhagavad Gita, the very last verse of the 18th chapter, Yatra Yogeshwaraha Krishna. The word Yogeshwara is often used as an adjective to Krishna, because Bhagavad Gita presents no less than 18 yogas through its 18 chapters. So he's the Lord of yoga. He's Yogeshwara, which simply means that he is deeply established within himself, so he knows, he experiences it, he understands it. Why is it so? Shankaracharya explains that because he is ever pure, he is ever awakened, he is ever free, and therefore his capabilities of knowing are not limited by the veil of ignorance. And the moment we speak of the veil of ignorance, the idea of pranayama comes, because the whole practice of pranayama is about removing this veil of ignorance. This ever pure, ever awakened, ever free is not only the nature of Krishna, it is the essential nature of every living entity, of every human being. But again, the difference is just that he's aware of it. We are not. This reminds me of the beautiful story of Queen Madalasa. She was the queen of Banaras, the knowledge capital of India, and she's often remembered as a self-enlightened mother who made her children also self-enlightened through her lullabies. So 3 of her children, 3 of her boys, she used to sing the moment they were born, and as they grew up, she used to sing this lullaby to them. Shuddhosi buddhosi niranjanosi sansara maya parivarjitosi. Shuddhosi, you are ever pure. Buddha, you are ever awakened. The word Buddha, we know what it means. You are ever enlightened. Niranjana, you are free from any taintment, free from any limitation. Sansara maya parivarjitosi. In your essential nature, you transcend the ignorance that is the cause of this world. Samsara swapnam tyajamoha nidram. Sansara swapnam. Awake from this dream of this world. Give up your sleep of ignorance. Madalasa putramuvacha vakyam. This is the lullaby that Madalasa sang to her children. So 3 princes of Banaras, 3 of her children became self-enlightened. As they grew up, they left the kingdom and went back to Mother Nature and became forest dwellers. Now their father was a little bit worried because he had no heir and he needed an heir. He required an heir. So as soon as the fourth child was born, he told his wife, stop with this lullaby, sing to them a common, normal lullaby. Don't sing this lullaby to them anymore. She accepted it, and that was the fourth child, which became the successor of the king and is known in Indian mythology as King Alarka of Banaras. So she is often when, for example, because mothers in India have played always an extremely crucial role in various traditions. For example, even if we look at Patanjali, from whom did he receive the deepest mysteries of yoga? Most probably from many masters. But the name that we find most prominently is his own mother, Gonika. He is often referred to as Patanjali as the son of Gonika, the great yogini. So mothers have played a very crucial role in forming some of the greatest masters of Indian spirituality. So this is what she was telling her children. She was just making aware of what they already were, and thus creating this difference between those that are not aware of their essential nature. Krishna is different because he is aware of that essential nature, of that essential quality of consciousness which resides within every human being, within every being, I must say. So now, what in the next shloka Sri Krishna starts to say is that the birth that you experience, because we celebrate the birth of great beings. We celebrate the birth of Krishna in India. It's a very big festival, Krishna Janmashtami. We celebrate the birth of Rama as Ramanavami, and we celebrate the birth of all great incarnations as well. As Patanjali Jayanti is there, we celebrate the birth of Patanjali. Tomorrow we'll be celebrating the birth of a very, very great soul, Christ himself, who enlightened such a big part of this world through his life, through his teachings. So we celebrate their birth. But when we celebrate, in that celebration, which is very fundamental to religious practices, religions celebrate the birth of their great masters. Every religion does that. Buddha Purnima is very special for Buddhists. But in that we often most probably forget that what we are actually celebrating transcends birth and death. The birth only exists of the physical body. Consciousness itself transcends birth and death. There is no moment of creation for consciousness, and there is no moment of destruction for consciousness. So this is what, while Sri Krishna is speaking of his various births, he tends to remind us, he wants to remind us in the next shloka, that even though in my essential nature I am Aja, the first word in the next shloka, Ajopi, Aja. Aja means unborn. Ja means birth, and Aja means non-birth, unborn. Because it is just a manifestation of an omnipresent hidden reality, like sunrise. Every morning the sun becomes visible. It doesn't mean that it has been created, it just becomes visible. That's all. And similarly, these births, these incarnations are just every day. In the morning the sun rises and then sets in the evening. An ignorant being might think that once the sun sets, it merges back, but in reality it doesn't. It remains ever existence. Or for example, when we rub two fire sticks, as a result of that rubbing, fire is produced. But is it really produced? The energy that manifests itself in the form of that fire was already present in the form, in a formless state as an energy in those fire sticks. So it's just a manifestation. That is what we are calling birth. The same is true about Sri Krishna, and the same is true about each and every human being. The body is born, the body is created in the womb of the mother. That is a truth. But what about the indwelling consciousness, which is the essential nature? The moment we take a mirror into the sunlight and a reflection is created in the mirror starts radiating light and warmth. Is the sun actually created? Just a reflection. All the warmth, all the light was omnipresent, was all around it. All those photons were around it. But it just became manifest in that mirror, in the form of that reflection. But that is not its essential nature. Its essential nature is that omnipresent light, which is not only reflecting upon the mirror, but is all around it and radiating out from the very source. So to make us aware of that omnipresent consciousness, of that omnipresent existence. But Sri Krishna wants us to make us aware of our unborn essential nature. So, but because of our identification with this body, because of our forgetfulness of that essential nature, we very easily say that I was born this and this day. So let us pronounce the next shloka, which really can be considered as presenting in a nutshell the entire philosophy behind the idea of birth through the idea of incarnation, which is Sri Krishna is speaking in his own context. He is speaking about himself. But most of what he is speaking about himself is equally applicable to every individual human being. So let us pronounce the next shloka. Ajopi, 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 san, 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 avyayatma, 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 bhutanam, 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 ishwaropi, 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 san, 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 prakritim, 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 swamadhisthaya, 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 sambhavami, 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 atmamayaya, 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 atmamayaya. Ajopi sannavyayatma bhutanam ishwaropi san prakritim swamadhisthaya sambhavamyatma mayaya. Ajopi san. Even though in reality I am unborn, I transcend birth, and avyayatma, myself, is imperishable, the very core of myself, which is that pure consciousness, that indwelling entity, that indwelling consciousness, which is referred to by the word Atman, the self, which is not consciousness, which is consciousness itself, avyayatma, that is imperishable, that cannot perish. It is not, vyaya means that which is liable to change, mutable, perishable, that which can get lost, that which can get destroyed. That is called vyaya. So avyayatma, even though myself is completely imperishable, and bhutanam ishwaropi san, and even though I am the Lord of all creatures, bhuta means those that exist. I am the Lord of all creatures, prakritim swamadhisthaya, yet establishing myself in my own essential nature, sambhavami, I take birth, atmamayaya, I come into being on this level of existence, I come into empiric being through maya, through my power. There are various explanations of the various meanings of the word maya. Maya means wisdom also, maya also means knowledge, deep insight. Maya also means veil of ignorance, and maya also beautifully means compassion. So it can also mean that out of compassion I take birth on this level of existence. The shloka is very deep, and it touches to some of the very core ideas of Vedanta and yoga. Because, for example, the idea of prakriti, the word prakriti that has been used, nature, what does it stand for? What does it mean? The idea of maya, what does it stand for in the worldview of yoga and Vedanta? Unless we don't understand all this, it's not easy to make sense of this shloka. So we'll go step by step. First of all, ajopi san, even though I am unborn, every manifestation of pure consciousness is fundamentally unborn. The Upanishads make this very clear. Whether it is the wise or the ignorant, dvau, both ajau, both are unborn, both transcend death. The only difference is that one has become a master of himself, one has become the Lord of himself, the other has lost that mastery in his ignorance. Isha Nisha. One is Isha, one is the Lord, and the other one is Anisha. Both are completely unborn, whether it is the knowing or the unknowing, but the one becomes all-powerful through his knowing, through his understanding. The other one remains steeped in poverty, completely powerless in his ignorance. The word for poor in Sanskrit, kripana, is used in the Upanishads in the sense of ignorance, inner poverty, in the sense of being devoid of inner wealth. We spoke of inner wealth. So the one who is devoid of this inner wealth, of which the greatest wealth is wisdom itself, knowledge itself, and therefore, if in the external world, in those days, gold was the greatest form of wealth, it was radiant, it was shining, very similar to the light of the sun. They took it often as a symbol to knowledge, a symbol of experience. So for example, when we speak of Hiranyagarbha, Kapila, one of the names of Kapila is Hiranyagarbha, the one with gold in his womb. What does it mean? The golden womb, the golden egg, it is invariably translated into English like this. Hiranyagarbha is the same what in Buddhism, because we have some such as you who know Buddhism well. Tathagata Garbha. In Buddhist traditions, it is Tathagata Garbha, and in Yogic traditions, it is Hiranyagarbha. And that Hiranya is the Sanskrit word for gold. Yet what does it stand for? It stands for that wisdom that a person derives through his direct experience. So one that has that wisdom in its womb, within himself, deep within himself, such a being is called Hiranyagarbha. The same meaning lies deep in the word Tathagata Garbha in the Buddhist traditions. The word Garbha is in both cases the same, just the first word has been changed. So both are completely unborn, because this is the very essential nature not only of every human being but of every being. Again, going back to the Upanishads, this great unborn self, the undecaying self, the undying self, the immortal self, the fearless self is what pure consciousness is, which resides at the core of every being. And someone, I'm quoting one of the Upanishads, someone who becomes aware of it, he transcends all fear in his life. Abhaya, he transcends all fears. So despite being unborn in reality, I take birth in various forms. There is a beautiful mantra we find that Prajapatis Charati Garbhe, the Lord of the universe, the Lord of all beings, because it exists in the heart of every being, it also abides in the heart of the mother. And as the child enters the womb, enters the mother's womb, it also enters the child from there, because it is already present in the heart of the mother. It also, and when the Veda speaks of a child, the Veda is not only speaking of a human child, but of all three types of species. And these three types of species in the Vedic cosmology stand for Andaja, those who are produced out of an egg, Jarayuja, those who are produced directly from a womb, and Udbhija, those which get produced by Udbhija means to break open the earth, which means trees. So all these three life forms have been included. There, at the core of Mother Earth, lies the very source of life. So from there, it derives life, and here in the womb of the mother, in the heart of the mother, that consciousness is already present, and antaha, it is present, ajayamanaha, though in reality it gets never produced, it is omnipresent, and it is infinite, and it does not end, it doesn't get destroyed, yet bahudha vijayate, residing in all these hearts, it gives birth to so many life forms. Tasya yonim paripashyanti dhiraha. The wise ones become aware of the essential nature of all these beings and identify with it in their deep experience. Tasmin hatasthur bhuvanani vishwa. All beings abide in it. It is the very source out of which everything arises. That entity is the self of everything that exists. So, in this word, ajopi sannavyayatma, we find it deeply related to these ideas that have been repeatedly expressed in the experiences of the masters of the Upanishads and the Vedic scriptures. Now the next word, avyayatma, myself, is imperishable. The time is over, so I will leave it here today. This is an ongoing class. Every class is uploaded after it has been edited on YouTube. So there is no need of finishing one shloka and rushing about it, but really trying to understand it, trying to analyze it and see how it can enlighten our life. And I'm joining you here not as a teacher, but myself also as a student of these great thoughts, great analysis that we find in the teachings of these great masters who had experienced that oneness, who had experienced that unity about which yoga is all about. The difference is just that I'm doing my study through speaking about it, you are doing the study through listening about it. That's the only difference. But I'm completely joining you as a student in this, and I find it myself tremendously as I prepare, as I think about these verses with all that I have received from my masters. Many times things that never made sense to me earlier start making sense to me now. And that is, I think, how a person grows. Many times things, not always everything makes sense to us initially, not everything is understandable, but as soon as we develop, as we evolve, as we grow further, our horizons become wider and greater, and we understand more and more. But for that, the important thing is that we never cease being a student. We always learn, we always remain a student, then we always grow. And I think this is what the other day when we were watching the documentary on Guruji's life, one of the most beautiful things about him was that he never ceased being a student of yoga. People call him Yogacharya, Yoga Guru. Throughout the whole world, he is known as one of the greatest masters. People have started considering him the incarnation of Patanjali in modern times, because he literally revived yoga in the whole world. Many people call him today the incarnation of Patanjali in modern times. Yet, whatever people might say, he himself always emphasized beautifully that he's still a student. He still explores this great ocean of yoga, the great depths of this yoga, the uncharted depths, the inner depths of yoga. So this is just a small attempt of doing that with our limited capabilities. Any question, if there is there, or you just ask me after the class is over, feel free. Let us conclude with a short prayer for the well-being of all beings. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः।